time, let me invite all of our speakers to come and take their seats up front. And I'll also take the opportunity to introduce my co-moderator, Mary Cain, who's going to be leading the discussion here. Mary is a second-year MD student at Stanford, and she is also an elite competitive athlete in her own right. So please join me now in welcoming Mary and all of the other speakers.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'll echo what Laura said. It's really cool having a Nobel laureate make an introduction for me. I'm Mary. I was a professional athlete growing up, and now I'm a second-year medical student here at Stanford. So go trees or whatever we are. This was a really incredible talk to be able to be a part of now in this discussion, but also listen into, because a lot of the research that you are all doing will be information that affects women like me who are hoping to get back into sport performance. When I was a kid, I was part of a professional track and field program that was sponsored by Nike. I was top 10 in the world as a middle distance runner. And unfortunately for me, I was a part of a system that is all too common in sport. I had an abusive relationship with my coach, and I ultimately developed relative energy deficiency in sport. I had secondary amenorrhea for 3.5 years. I broke a total of 5 bones and really kind of went through a lot of the struggles that so many athletes, in particular women, do while really trying to balance like what is health as an athlete. And so it was really exciting to hear some of the more positive stories and hear more of the research that we're doing to better understand the differences between female and male athletes in terms of like true performance, but also considering what kind of are these markers to make sure people are really staying healthy as they're trying to kind of find that red line of what is high intensity training and what is actually health. And so I'm going to start with the first question to our panel, but for folks that are interested in asking questions to any of the panelists, there's microphones in the aisles. You're welcome to stand up and get in line. But to start off, of course, I have to ask about RED-S because that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm really curious to hear maybe more about the study that you're kind of creating right now, looking at mouse models and how we can kind of better understand the ability to recover from RED-S, because I think that's something that, as someone who's experienced it, firsthand experience I'm interested in. But I also think a lot of people don't fully understand like what is the best path to recovery. So maybe as you're like creating these models of like changing diets, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about what you guys have so far put together.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you. So yes, we're also very excited to now go into the next steps. The first step was to indeed like form this model, and now we have the molecular signature kind of energy deficiency now to move forward to indeed like really try to treat those mice with the energy deficiency. So we're now formulating a new diet based on all the molecular signatures that we see. So one example, for example, that they showed is that we see like certain receptors that are changing, that are involved in amino acid uptake. So we're trying to use those molecular results from the mice to now incorporate in such a diet, and then indeed measure the mice at several time points to see if we can increase like the speed of the recovery, but also if it's sustainable later on. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I see we have a first question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, this is a little high. That's okay, I'll stand. Hi, everyone. Thanks for all the really fascinating talks. I have a question for Malene. So I'm really interested in the differences you're seeing in the visceral adipose tissue between males and females. And I was wondering if you've noticed or were able to observe any differences in like beiging of the fat in between the different sexes with exercise.
Yeah, so we do see improved metabolic signatures indicative of beiging. I mean, it's still debated whether that actually occurs in humans or not, and like with adipose tissue. But we do see adaptations in that direction, and that happens in both men and women. And say we've done that with animals too, with training. We're also working on a really big study in humans with 1,500 people where we have before and after training in adipose. And I think, so the analyses are ongoing there. And then from that data, I think we'll learn a lot more. And also being able to look at different ages, different types of training, comparing resistance to endurance. So I think we'll learn more about that in the future. Also, I should have mentioned during my talk, like a caveat with looking at visceral fat in endurance athletes is that they don't have a lot. Yeah. So it's actually very hard to get it. So that's the challenge with studying white adipose tissue in endurance athletes in particular. So yeah, but thanks for the question.
Thank you.
We can alternate mics, so if you want to go next.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Danos. I'm at the University of San Diego. I'm really grateful to be included in this conversation today. Thank you. My specialty is muscle physiology, and I'm interested in what happens during motherhood and lactation to muscle tendon units and how that impacts performance, right? And what we're finding is that lactation is actually an incredibly energetic demand on the body, and some of the remodeling that we see in skeletal muscle mimics that of starvation. Mm-hmm. And so do you have any insights on the molecular markers that might tell us what is happening during lactation, but more importantly, that we can monitor during pregnancy so that we can counteract some of those intense remodeling that happens during lactation in a potential athlete? Does that make sense?
Thank you for that question. I think this is a very important direction. So one thing that we observed, I didn't show it today, but we see, for example, related to lactation, we didn't test this in lactating mice, first of all, but what we do see is that oxytocin and also the oxytocin receptor, which is involved in inducing the lactation response, is affected a lot. And actually in all the organs that we tested, we see an effect of this receptor. So that might be one direction to look into too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to talk some more.
Yes. Me too. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Williams. I'm at Penn State. I'm a female athlete triad researcher. Really psyched to be here and thank all of you for your great work. Mary Cain, it's really nice to meet you. I teach a class in women's health and exercise, so I talk about you. Thank you for your bravery. My question is about the mouse model. And what we've noted in human clinical trials, both inducing menstrual disturbances and the triad, if you will, and in comparison to trials where we've reversed it or tried to reverse it, is that changes can happen at different rates. So I'm curious to see that you're thinking about recovery as well. So for example, things can happen at different rates, and the signals, which we can't very well isolate with human clinical research, may differ. So for example, it appears that the daily energy deficit is an important predictor of who gets a menstrual disturbance and who doesn't. Mm-hmm. But with recovery, we saw that putting on body fat actually seemed to be the biggest predictor. Mm-hmm. And another thing relative to recovery is that one may think reproductive function is recovering, but you may see the onset of menses, but it may take almost a year or sequential cycles that are of normal length, like 2 in a row, for example, to really see that ovulation is actually starting to occur with a greater frequency, and estrogen and progesterone are starting to get more normal looking patterns. So there's a discordance between the onset of menses, regular ovulation, and then the actual steroid exposure. And I'm just saying all this to maybe get you to think about it during those really cool recovery experiments that you seem to be embarking on. So I wondered as well if you will be able to use the model eventually to isolate, certain mechanisms. It seems like you're doing a really good job describing things, but that'll just be really wonderful if you can get to that point.
Yeah,
Really.
Thank you for that insight. That's very useful for the design of our experiments as well. So one thing that we can do with the model to also give like a different amount for the recovery, to give different amounts of food, like do different levels and see if that affects the recovery rate or the speed. Another thing that we also did in this study is to look at different levels of, for example, the HPG axis that affects the reproduction, and then we see effects on all those different levels, and we can get a bit of insight on the whole pathway and the mechanism that is doing this. Yeah.
Any plans to work in male mice?
So we've done all those experiments also in male mice, and we see a different effect, especially for the molecular signature and the organ size. So in the males, we see that the kidney is more affected, to give like a very general result. And then we see in the females, it's more the reproductive organs that are affected. So there's a big difference there. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi. I have a question on the HIIT versus endurance training research. So it seemed like your research was saying that for older adults, HIIT might have a positive impact. But we're also seeing research now about the importance of strength training and endurance training for women in perimenopause and menopause due to bone density loss and risk for all of that. So I'm just curious to get your perspective on how those two correlate or align.
Yeah, no,
with
that's
each
a
other.
great question. So yeah, unfortunately, we didn't look at resistance training specifically, but I think our PI kind of framed the study as perhaps HIIT and resistance training are more similar. So Malene actually mentioned a study that's in like 1,500 adults. It's called MotorPAC. It's like Molecular Transducers Physical Activity Consortium. But they actually, their arms are comparing endurance training and resistance training. So we kind of set up a smaller parallel study that's endurance and HIIT. So I guess the goal is that eventually we could also compare to resistance training. And yeah, we hypothesize that maybe HIIT and resistance training will be a bit more similar or have some shared markers in some regards. But yeah, you're definitely right that resistance training is, of course, very important as well.
Thanks.
Hello, first of all, thank you so much for this very fascinating presentation. My name is Claire, and I'm a freshman here at Stanford on the cycling team and hoping to major in human biology. I also come from a background of RED, so I know how critical the need for awareness and education is, and also just how prevalent it is across both high schools and also collegiate athletics. I mean, I know that like for female athletes, I think risk rate is like close to like 60%, which is actually really insane. My question is, so, I mean, across, especially like public schools, there are a lot of schools in the US that are under-resourced. Coaches are already on very, very low pay. And there are just institutional barriers that limit our ability to kind of make changes to how coaches are educated and how I guess like athletes are protected. I'm wondering how we can effectively implement like solutions to addressing REDS and like helping athletes, I mean, first of all, like even know what REDS is, because I've talked to so many of my like teammates, they've never heard of it. They don't know the importance of nutrition and fueling. How can we like, I guess, overcome those systemic and like cultural barriers that prevent us from, providing solutions to educate athletes about REDS?
Yeah, I can maybe chime in with this one. Really nice to meet you, Claire. And first off, what you're doing already is really important. The fact that you're talking to your teammates and your classmates and your friends about the topic. I mean, that's, I think, just a major way always to create awareness, is just speaking about something. I personally am very passionate about the idea of creating more of a qualification standard for coaches. It's something that I think is really important. And, right now, the way that a lot of youth sports is structured, it is, maybe a teacher who wants to give back to students, who's able to kind of like take on the role of a coach. And even the best intentions for somebody to be working with young people, it doesn't necessarily mean they're kind of equipped for some of the challenges that so many young athletes face. And so as much as I maybe went through experiences of really bad coaching, even the best coaches, these are uncomfortable conversations to sometimes be having with young women. Like, are you still menstruating? How is your relationship with food? And even if, a student is giving you answers being like, I'm not menstruating, I have a bad relationship, you're not necessarily going to be the most qualified person to help someone manage that. And I think, to me, a lot of, coaching qualifications really should be just kind of education of like who you can pass a student off to, right? Are there resources within your school district? Is there a doctor Is there, a provider who would be most appropriate for this student to be able to work with? And so there are organizations that are kind of trying to essentially lobby and kind of fight for creating some of this education. But as you noted, unfortunately, there really isn't anything right now. And so because we're in a system that this doesn't exist, number one, fighting for it to happen is a really important kind of part of the process, but also just continuing to talk about it. In 2019, I came out with a New York Times piece that I talked to my editor recently. I think it's nearly at 20 million views, where I talked about my experience of abusive coaching and suffering from REDS. And I'm really proud of that because I hope it helps move the needle with this conversation. But I think the more students like you kind of speak out, continue to talk about it, reshare resources that do already exist, I think that is kind of right now a really important first step. But thank you for asking that.
Thank you so much. And I also just wanted to add, Mary Cain, as someone that has overcome an eating disorder as an athlete, I just thought that underfueling and not eating enough would make me a faster runner. Your story is extremely inspiring, and it's really amazing to finally meet you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And before the next question, I also just want to piggyback off of that. I think it's really important to delineate risk versus prevalence. So when we're talking about REDS, if you look at the prevalence of REDS, like RED risk, it's less than 8%, I think. And so you kind of think of it as a pyramid. It's most people are in green, and that's kind of how REDS is, risk level. It's an extended stoplight of green, yellow, orange, and red. And it does dwindle as you get to these higher risk situations. They absolutely still happen, and there's still an education there. But I think we are seeing on the high school level the opposite of that. Athletes skip breakfast a few times. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm at risk for REDS. And that is our job for education, is that it's really important to learn about these things, but that doesn't mean that everything always leads to something red, something bad. And on the coaching perspective, the US doesn't have any regulations on who coaches. And there is tons of platforms. Faster is one of them. Voice in Sport is one of them. There's a lot of organizations that are trying to educate coaches, players, families, because even if you have a great coach and a great athlete, they go home and then that environment's very different. So it's very multifaceted, and it's very difficult to attack. It's something very important that we're all really passionate about. But it's that education, what does that look like? And there's, a lot of great organizations and resources online too that really help. But again, it's just having that awareness that not everything, all roads don't lead to something super negative, especially in the endurance space. It's oh my gosh, everyone has REDS. They don't. Not everyone has REDS. And getting those people the care that they need, and also ensuring that we're not scaring people into oh my gosh, I have a bone stress injury. Now my career's over. So I think we're seeing actually the opposite of that. So we just have to be really careful with our messaging.
Hello, my name is Nicole Mackey. I'm a registered dietitian, and I also work with a lot of athletes with REDS. So I'm also going to ask another question about REDS, and a little bit repetitive of the other previous questions, so forgive me if the answer is repetitive. But I'm particularly interested in the recovery diet for the mice. So for mice, it might be as simple as just increasing their energy intake, right? They don't have the brain capacity that we have. For humans, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Of course, optimizing energy availability is the cornerstone for treatment of REDS, but how and what are your thoughts on how this study can be used and how it can be translated to humans suffering with REDS?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, that's a really, a big caveat in our studies, of course, that after we induce the energy deficiency, we can give the food again and they will eat. They will start eating and they will recover. But that's indeed a different story in the human situation. But what we try to understand is on a molecular or an organ scale, how are these organs adapting to getting food again? And if we can maybe help a little bit with putting specific nutrients into that diet to hopefully translate that to humans as well, and hopefully help in the future for that. So. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everything you guys are doing to further the research in this area. It's really necessary and important.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have time for one more question. So for the folks that aren't able to ask a question, please feel free to come and find us. I know lunch is pretty soon, but you'll be the last one.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I'd like to echo what everyone has said before about how impactful all you have been in this field, and how I'm very honored to be here before you guys today. Thank you so much for the great presentations. Seems like a lot of us are really interested in recovery from REDS, so kind of same tangent. So I'm wondering, I mean, this molecular moonshot isn't necessarily my strong suit. So how much do we know about actual full recovery or downstream effects of long-term REDS? You know, because my experience in athletics, you don't have a period for 3 years and then you get it back and they're like, all right, you're fixed, go on. But we don't know, like, I mean, at least I don't know, like, what that, you know, hormonal deprivation for so long, like, has an effect like down the line, or what we should still be considering. What is holistic recovery, you know? So if anyone has any remarks on that.
Yeah, I think there is still a lot to be done. So I think at least, yeah, indeed, the recovery period, there's not a lot of study on it. So I think, yeah, there's still a lot of opportunity to start to do this, and indeed to see maybe not only look at the menstrual cycles or like body weight gain as only the marker, but also look at hormonal profiles or other molecules to see if indeed the organs are recovered from it. Yeah.
And what you said about the organ shrinking, didn't know that at all. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, I think in the interest of time, please join me in thanking all of our speakers and our co-moderator for an amazing discussion. Thank you.